week 4 of DMD 320, Application and Mobile Design. How's everybody doing? All right, so this week is super exciting because after 3 weeks of getting to know the class, going through all of the preparatory stuff, reminding ourselves about UX design, we are going to dive into our very first project. So let's go to the week 4 module. Take a look at week 4 here. So we're going to introduce right now our first project, a real-life desktop to mobile redesign. You can probably tell by the title what we're going to do. So we're going to go through the Project 1 handout, which we'll look at in a second. You can download it right here, of course. We're going to talk about or show you some resources for converting a desktop site to a mobile site or a mobile app. You do have some media to watch, or rather read, I should say, this week. The website redesign process, your website redesign strategy in 5 steps. That is this article right here from WebFX, which is a great digital marketing company. So it's a pretty short article. Be sure to read through this. This sort of goes through a variety of tips and tricks from a marketing point of view about redesigning your website. So we're going to be redesigning an existing website from a desktop to a mobile. So obviously we're going to look at it from a design point of view, but this article is great because it gives you the perspective from a content point of view from sort of marketing. So take a look at that, read through it. It'll give you some nice perspective to work with. Okay, so we're going to go through the project right now. Now you'll notice that there is something due this week, and that is really just to read through the project and get to know it. So I'm going to go through it with you right now, and then obviously you have to go through it on your own and make sure you really understand it and are ready to sort of rock and roll on it. We'll talk about homework in a minute. All right, so let's look at that Project 1 handout. Okay, so here we are, Project 1, a real-life desktop to mobile redesign. Okay, so like a lot of my assignments, if you've had me from previous classes, that is always a read first. I usually include a relevant article or information at the beginning that can help sort of get your head into the right place before we start working. So read through this. This is actually your initial homework for the week. Make sure you read through this. This is excerpted from 2 actual articles. The first one is Essential Tips for Converting a Desktop Site to Mobile, and the second one is How to Turn a Website into a Mobile App. These are both really useful articles that I basically sliced and diced and put together in a way that will make a lot of sense for what we're doing. So read through these. It gives you lots of good tips and tricks, and there's lots of examples of conversions from full desktop sites to mobile app status, because that's really what we're going to be focusing on, right? Okay, so you can go through that. It's a fairly long article with a bunch of different examples, some fun facts, and some good bullet points, okay? So it's a few pages of this, and obviously you know you're at the end of the read first by seeing the 3 orange dots. Okay, so you're going to go through that on your own. That'll be your essential reading along with the article that's linked in the module. All right, let's look at the actual project. Okay, so what is our theme for this project? The theme is Going Mobile. British rock band The Who, you might know The Who, released their song Going Mobile in 1971, which coincidentally was the year I was born, on their album Who's Next. It was written and sung by their lead guitarist and main writer, Pete Townsend. Some of the lyrics include this. I'm not going to sing the song. You don't want to hear me sing it. But you can go ahead and read through it, right? It's a great song. If you haven't heard it yet or you're not familiar with The Who, certainly check it out. Now, of course, Pete Townsend wrote this song in 1971. 36 years later, the first iPhone was released. Is that a coincidence? Of course it's a coincidence. It has nothing to do with what we're doing, but it's sort of a fun coincidence. So while the song was written about the joy of having a mobile home and being able to travel the open road, the song could easily have been written about the widespread adoption and love of mobile devices that we have today. So check that out. Okay, so what's our directions? All right, so you have been hired to convert a client's desktop-only website into a mobile app prototype. There are a lot of companies out there, including your university at the present moment, that has a desktop-only website, and they don't really have a very good mobile version of it. And so converting it to a mobile app prototype is an important step to take for interacting with the audiences you want to interact with. Today, most people who access web content will do so first and foremost from their mobile device. And this is not age specific. You might think, oh, well, that's just for young people. Not true. People of all ages, their first instinct when they're going to a website or trying to access some sort of web content will check it out on their phone first, which means you have to have a good mobile version of it. What's more, if people want to continue to interact with that web content or that company or that organization, they are more than likely want to have an app from it because it makes it easier for them to constantly access it. And so turning a desktop website into a mobile app prototype is a very good first step in opening yourself up to that larger audience. And so that's what we're going to do so. In doing so, they are hoping to increase visibility, expand their user base, and provide their customers with a more efficient, reliable, and fun way to interact with them on a regular basis. Okay, so deliverables and project format. Note that this entire project will be completed within one giant Adobe XD file. Items marked below as deliverable will be included. In the end, you will have an interactive quote-unquote poster that shows all steps in your mobile app development. Now, I showed you guys an example of this earlier in the semester, but I'm going to go back and show you again. Here we are in Adobe XD. You can find this in the Project One folder. This is a sample project, and so your final project is going to include a bunch of deliverables. The design brief, which is this right here. It's going to include a mood board, which is this right here. Your wireframes for the mobile app prototype. The visual design based off of the wireframes of your mobile app prototype, and the actual functioning prototype itself, which will then, of course, be all linked together, as you can see here that they are, right? Everything's all linky together, so you can go around and prototype it. Naturally, this will then be able to be actively interfaced and tested out by simply putting up your viewer here and clicking around and testing out the functionality of it. So that's what you're going to build. One big giant deliverable with these 4 prototypes, making your way linearly through the design process from brief to board to wireframe to design to prototype. Okay? All right, back to the assignment. So, moving down here, the first thing you're going to do, which is your very first deliverable, is you're going to choose your client and create your design brief. Now, you could say that what we're creating is a brief because it's really short. Most design briefs, of course, are at least a few pages long, but for our purposes, we're just going to do a couple of paragraphs because we just want to sort of set the stage for what we're going to be designing. So you're going to choose from one of the following clients below to design your mobile app for. You're going to write this brief, a 1 to 2 paragraph description about who the client is, what their purpose of their desktop site is, which they already have, and who you think their target audience is. That's your opinion, of course. You have to do your research. Go to their website, get to know who they are, do further research beyond their website, and try to extrapolate who their audience is and what you think the purpose of their desktop site is. Why did they build that website? How well does it function? What is it accomplishing? And of course, you're going to place this paragraph at the top of your interactive poster right here under company profile and target audience, okay? So here are the clients you can choose from. And here are the links to their desktop websites. The town of Rindge, New Hampshire, right? Towns have their own websites, municipal websites that are meant to be used to help the people that live in that town get certain things done. Check out the town of Rindge's website. Winchester Hospital in Winchester, Massachusetts, their desktop website. Kelly's Roast Beef, which has multiple locations throughout Massachusetts. You can check out their desktop website. By the way, if you haven't been to Kelly's, their food is yummy. Newbury Comics, which also has multiple locations in New Hampshire, Maine, and Massachusetts. Check out their desktop website. Mystic Valley Travel, which is a travel agency in Medford, Massachusetts. You can check out theirs. And this place here, the Salon on Haven, which is a hair salon in Reading, Massachusetts. Now, the thing all of these places have in common is they do not have an app for their website. And they don't have a good mobile version of their website. So you pick whichever one you are most interested in. Obviously, there's a variety of things here that do different things. I want you to pick whichever one you're interested in. So, like I said here, note that each of these choices do not currently have a mobile app, and if they have a responsive or mobile site, it's pretty bad. So they need your help. Okay. Now, you can also, if you don't like these choices, you can choose your own desktop site to convert to a mobile app. But again, it has to not already have a mobile app. And if they have a mobile version of their site, it has to be pretty terrible. And of course, if you decide to pick your own option not from my list, you have to write an additional paragraph in your design brief explaining why you are choosing the client, and I have to approve it, okay? So it's up to you whether or not you want to go with one of the ones that I'm giving you, or if you want to pick your own. But if you pick your own, you have to explain why, and I have to approve it for you, okay? Okay. Next, you're going to do research and inspiration, which is going to take you to your second deliverable, the mood board. So now that you've chosen your client, it's time to do some research and get inspired about your design possibilities. You're going to want to hop online and into the Apple or Android app stores and research your client's potential competition. So while they might not have a mobile app, their competition probably does. Go see what their competition does. See what they do right. See what you like, what you don't like, what works, what doesn't work. Take notes, take screenshots, get your research done. Be sure they already have a mobile app, of course. Their competition, many of them do. Your focus here will be on how they use visual elements, how they use layout, their use of shapes, icons, color, typography, graphics, and so on, to create a well-designed and engaging mobile app. Next, you are going to go to either Dribbble or Behance. You can go to both. If you've never been to either one, they are, of course, platforms that creative people can post their projects that we're working on. So let's hop over to Dribbble here, and I'll show you what happens. So we'll go over to Dribbble, and once you get over there to either Dribbble or Behance, you're going to type in mobile app into the search bar, and you're going to explore a whole bunch of wonderful mobile designs that were done by designers recently. So this will give you some sort of inspiration. So here we are on Dribbble. We'll go up to the search bar. We'll type in mobile app and search, and you're going to get to see a whole ton of really cool mobile app projects that were done by a variety of current designers. This will give you some great inspiration for how you can design your mobile app. Now again, I'm not asking you to look at these so you can rip off other people's work. Obviously, you're better than that. But a little inspiration from other people's stuff goes a long way. It never hurts to see what's happening out there and see what people are working on. Obviously, you can click on any of these, and you have to sign in with Google to get into Dribbble. It's free to sign in, and you can explore all the things that they did with their mobile app and really get a good overview of it. Behance, of course, is another great resource, so check them both out. Explore these, spend some time combing through, make notes about how they use typography, color, shapes, etc. What really speaks to you? What do you like? So that's your research and inspiration, and you're going to build all of that information that you find inspirational and useful into your mood board. Now there's details in our working document about our workflow, about how you're going to build your mood board, but obviously, as you see here back in the example, you're going to include imagery that makes sense, that is inspirational and makes sense for what you're going to do. It can be photography, it can be graphics, it can be illustration, whatever. You're going to put together your color palette. You're going to choose your fonts and make sure you cover headings, subheading, lists, and body copy and format them properly. And you're going to choose from the resources that I gave you from icons which sort of iconography you're going to use for your navigation tools. So that's how you're going to put together your mood board. Do your research, get inspired, and then build your mood board. Just so you know, this example I'm showing you is kind of a basic one. If you want to make it bigger and add more things than what is required here, as long as you have the bare requirements down, you're good. Don't feel the need to stop here. You can show me more stuff. That's fine too. Okay? All right, so that's deliverable 2. Next, and here, of course, is that mood board again. So we are then going to move down. So these are all the details about how to make the mood board. So you can extract images. Again, you can use a lot of the places that we've used before, Unsplash, Pixabay, Pexels. You can shoot your own photographs if you would like. Obviously, you're looking for consistency. Collect more photos than you think you will need, meaning collect way more photos than you're actually going to show me on your mood board, okay? Aside from what you're putting on your mood board, you need to make folders full of stuff that you're going to use in your app. Photography or graphics or illustration might be a big part of that. Color palette, same thing. You're going to do 4 to 6 squares alongside your imagery, sampling your favorite colors from the photos, right? It's a good idea, or from the graphics. It's a good idea to pull colors directly from them. So make sure your color palette makes sense with your imager. You can see that all of these colors were pulled from the photographs. The orange appears in a couple of places, that appears in a bunch of places, so on and so forth. If you need to explore more of color, right, make sure that you go to Adobe Color. That'll give you a place to sort of do some exploring. And of course, if you sign in with your Adobe account, you can save your color palette for later use with your Adobe software. It'll pop up in your Adobe XD, your Photoshop, and your Illustrator, okay? Along with your color palette, make sure that in your color palette you have at least one very dark color and one very light color. It doesn't have to be black or white. In fact, it probably shouldn't be black and white. But you'll see in this example here, we have one super dark color, which is kind of a dark bluish gray, and a very light gray. Those are important because you will need to use contrast for your typography, and those certainly come in handy. So that is your guidelines for your color palette, your images, and then of course fonts. You're going to want to choose 1 to 2 fonts that have multiple type styles, such as book, bold, italic, demi-bold, etc., that makes sense with your client choice. By this point, you guys know how to pick out good fonts, right? Make sure that the personality of the font you are choosing makes sense for the type of client you have chosen. If your client is very serious looking and maybe has a historic personality, then you go for an older looking serif typeface. If they're more modern and cutting edge, maybe you go for a sleek, thinner sans serif, and so on and so on. Make sure that you're making good visual choices for your typography that makes sense for the personality of your client, which of course now you are familiar with because you've done your research. So this way you'll have multiple choices that all inherently work well together. Make choices as to which would work best for a headline, a subheadline, a list, and a paragraph of copy. And then of course you're going to demonstrate those on your mood board like in the example above. Okay? All right, moving on. And then lastly, like I said, icons in the project folder. It's in project 1, it's in our resources folder. You're going to find a collection of icons in the Adobe Illustrator format and in the XD format, and you can use any of those. Make sure they make sense together. They should come from the same sets, okay? And of course, you can recolor those as you need to. Okay, next section. Which screens are we designing? This is super important. We're not designing the entire mobile app prototype. That would take far too long. We're only doing a handful of screens for project 1 here. So we're going to be designing 4 screens for this project. That is it. That doesn't seem like a lot, but it's a lot of work. So you must design, of course, the home page, which is in app development is known as the launch page. It's the first page that people come to when they first launch the app. But the other 3 screens are entirely up to you. Refer back to your client's desktop site to see what else you can include. You decide which other screens would make sense for their app. So this is going to require some thought and research and contemplation. So you have to have your home screen, your launch page, but then the other 3 are entirely up to you. Now, note that we are going to be designing specifically for the iPhone 10, the iPhone 10s, or the 11 Pro format from Adobe XD. So when you first open up Adobe XD and you choose your artboard sizes, choose those, the iPhone 10, 10s, or 11 Pro. And this is going to go, of course, below your mood board, and you're going to lay out the 4 screens horizontally like you see here, okay? And this is going to be the basis for your 3rd deliverable, which we'll get to in a second, which is wireframes, okay? Okay. Moving on. So now that you have those 4 blank screens above, you're going to be creating simple black and white and gray wireframes. Now, we're not doing paper wireframes here. However, there is a downloadable document in the project folder that you can print if you would like to do some pencil wireframes just for your own benefit. If you want to sketch things out in advance and doodle and do them in a rapid prototyping method before we get into XD, I would encourage you to do so. It makes life a lot easier and you don't have to worry about the software. But the actual wireframes we're making for the deliverable, we're just doing right here in XD, okay? And we're going to do them in black, white, and gray as you see in these examples. Rectangles, we are putting in actual type. If you don't know at the time when you make the wireframes what you want these things to say, what you want your labels and your typography to say, feel free to put in temporary type. You can use lorem ipsum. But if you already know some of the wording you're going to use, because maybe you're just taking it directly from their desktop site, you can obviously put in the actual words, okay? Make sure that you remember to put in at the top of each of the screens the status information that you can get from our icon list that I gave you. That's just going to represent what we see at the top of most iPhones, right? The clock, the cellular activity, the Wi-Fi activity, and the battery life. Okay, so make sure you put those up at the top. You may want to start by loosely sketching, like I said, by hand before you commit to going into XD. I think it's a good idea. We talked about adding the iOS status bar at the top. It can be found in the project folder and the class resources. Now, if you're a little fuzzy on how to do wireframes or what they are, remember we have the All About Wireframes document we went over last week. Make sure you know what you're doing before you get into wireframes. At this point in this class, if you present wireframes to me that don't look like these, and they are not wireframes, I am going to call you on it. By now, you should be very clear as to what they are. So make sure you're familiar with that, okay? And of course, you have examples to follow. Okay, next, our fourth deliverable. Now, by the way, at this point, you're probably thinking, this is a lot of work. You're not doing this all in 1 week. You have multiple weeks to do this in. You can see the due date schedule on Canvas. I'm just going through the entire project right now as an overview. We will revisit all of these sections as we get to the weeks where they are due, okay? By the way, back in wireframes, one thing I forgot to tell you is make sure that you drag guides out from the outside to give yourself space along the outside, which is important. 10 pixels will work nicely because you, of course, don't want important elements to bleed off the side. Now, that being said, when you're actually placing in the actual elements, certain things like photographs and whatnot can bleed off the side of the screen, but things that you need somebody to touch with their finger, you want to make sure it's moved in far enough that they can actually touch it, okay? Okay, and remember, we learned this a couple of classes ago, the average amount of space that somebody needs to touch on a screen with their finger is about 40 pixels square. So make sure you're leaving an appropriate amount of space between elements so people can touch them with their finger and not accidentally touch something else nearby. Okay, so deliverable 4, the actual visual design. So now that you have your wireframes established and your basic layout is settled on, you're going to complete the visual design by adding the final elements, which of course can include photography, graphics, illustration, the actual colors from your color palette you're going to use, and of course your specific font choices. Maybe you just use temporary font choices in the wireframes. That's okay. We can go back now and make them the actual font choices, including type styles that you want. Be sure to take time to try out different options until you're completely happy with it. In the design phase, you should try a bunch of different iterations. I may not see all those iterations in your final deliverable, but at this point you should be doing them for you to make sure that you're actually making the best design choices that you can. So do not rush this process. Make good choices. Refer back to your mood board, just in case you feel as though you're losing your initial concept. Always refer back to what your original ideas are. Everything, when we're all done, should make sense together. You want to start the design process by simply duplicating all of your wireframes. You can just lasso them together and drag and duplicate them, doing the old option drag trick, right? And that'll give you your set of screens to use for the final designs. Again, if we go back here to the XD example, once you have your wireframes here, you can just lasso all of them like that, and then option drag, and you can duplicate them right below it and use that for your design screens, which you can then start adding in your final visual elements. Now, again, I told you to do multiple iterations of it, so don't just do it once. Duplicate it, do it again, duplicate it, do it again, and so on and so forth, and then you're going to present in your final deliverable the version you are happiest with. There will be opportunities along the way to show your work to myself as well as your classmates and get feedback. So until you turn in your final deliverable, feel free to leave up different versions of your design, and then we can go through and decide what works and what doesn't, okay? Don't feel like you have to just settle on a final design right away. In fact, don't. All right. Moving on. Now, your final deliverable, of course, is the prototype. I'm not going to spend very long on this because later on in a future class, we're going to get into a whole bunch of the prototyping tools. They've updated them in Adobe XD. Maybe you're familiar with them, maybe you're not, but they have object-specific prototyping tools now, which are super useful. So we'll get into that later. But your next part of your project is deliverable 5, which is to make the prototype. And similar to the design stage, you're going to begin by duplicating all the design screens, drag them down, and of course here we'll be creating the screen-to-screen and object-to-screen connections that apply interactions to replicate how your app will respond once coded and launched. Like I said, we will demonstrate more of this later on about the new functionality for prototyping, so don't worry too much about it now, but you will be getting to the prototyping stage soon enough. Obviously, you can practice with prototyping in advance, and if you feel pretty confident in all your prototyping skills, you can start building it. Okay, moving on. Extra credit. As you know from probably taking me before, I like having some extra credit in my assignment. You'll notice that in the example XD file, that at the top of the design brief, there was a app logo. That is not required. It is extra credit. So if you would like, every great app needs a well-designed and eye-catching app icon that will sit proudly on the home screen of your user's iPhone, or Android device for that matter. For extra credit, design an app icon to go along with your wonderfully designed mobile app. Be sure to review and follow the Apple App Icon Guidelines. Yes, Apple has guidelines for app icons. Before you can submit it to them for use with your app, you have to follow these guidelines. So make sure you read through these first. It's everything from the general look and feel of it to the actual size of it. So be sure to read through that. So you can design this, of course, in Adobe Illustrator. Is probably a great place to design it, but you can design it in Photoshop if you would like, whatever you would like. Once you've completed your app icon design and you want to earn some extra credit, put that right at the top of your design brief, and that will look fabulous. All right, so that's it. That is the overview of Project 1. Now, you already know the workflow, so you'll be familiar with that. We're going to follow the same workflow for Project 2, which will just be a little more complex. But make sure that you are totally comfortable in working with Project 1. Your homework, starting right now, is, of course, to choose your clients. Make sure that you pick your client and get working on your design brief. That is due next week. I need your design brief completed, the paragraph about what your client is all about, and the paragraph about who your perceived audience is. And also due next week is Deliverable 2, the mood board. So get working on your research immediately. A lot to do in a short period of time. So Deliverable 1 and Deliverable 2 are due next week. So take the time now to really get to know that project and get rolling. Hopefully that overview is helpful. And if you have any questions, concerns, please let me know. All right, I'll talk to you guys soon.